Cool. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. But thanks for coming along to our AMA. Today we have Hannah here, who is quite an inspiration for, I think, many women in technology, but more broadly, I think, in the education space of technology. She's been actively involved in organizations like Code Like a Girl, MoneyGirl, the Girls Programming Network, and Creatable as well. You only need to bring up, I guess, her LinkedIn to see all her crazy accomplishments for such a young woman. It's quite inspiring for many people. I guess I'll pass it over to Hannah if you want to add anything to introduce yourself.
Hey, now I'd like to remove a few things. Maybe my giant face from the quiet live stream. Yeah, thanks so much for the intro, guys. It's really nice to come back and chat to CSE SOC. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, cool. I guess we'll get started into some of the questions that are on the Slido. So the first question we have here is a question asking why you chose to get into education stuff. I guess there were so many paths you could have picked from. Why education?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it's a funny situation because you say like, oh, there's so many paths to pick from. But when I was at uni, it's been a while, it sort of seemed like everybody was going and doing the same thing. Like you get your comp sci degree and then you go to Silicon Valley or Sydney, get a tech job, spend some time, like learn some stuff, and then like what? Like then that's it. So it was kind of strange because I didn't realize that at the time. So I didn't realize that there wasn't diversification in like what you do after uni. I just thought, well, that is what you're meant to do when you're finished your comp sci or your software engineering degree. So so I did that, first of all, I should say. Like I had internships and I took a grad job as a software engineer and stuff like that. But I didn't think there was anything else I could spend my time doing other than coding. So yeah, it's strange to hear the question framed that way, because it's like, oh, were there other things I could have done? Because at the time it didn't feel like there were, or it felt sort of like, if you didn't go and get a tech job, then did you really learn anything? Or do you really know how to code? Like you spent 4 years learning how to code, and at the end, if you take another job, it means you didn't learn how to code instead of that you chose to do something else. So so that's kind of funny. But I spent a couple of years working as a software engineer first. And the thing that happened was that I just didn't stop teaching. So at UNSW, obviously, like in the comp sci department, you might have found that a lot of lecturers are your friends and a lot of tutors are your friends, and like you can become a tutor and get a job as a tutor, which is amazing, but also a little bizarre at the same time. So I very much benefited from that. I was teaching from my second year onwards, which meant that by the time I finished uni, I had been teaching for like 1 year less than I'd been learning. And the stuff I was teaching like was not just one course. So I was teaching so many different courses that it was a job as well as learning. It's sort of like, when do they start paying you to be here, And the funny thing is, so many people did that. And then we all just graduated and everyone stopped. And you're like, wait, I actually enjoyed myself. I had such a fun time. Like that's what actually got me. Like nothing gets you to uni like having people waiting there for you. So, I'd have those ungodly early hour labs where I'm teaching. And if I'm late, then I'm late. Like you're trying to be professional. So it was strange when we finished and everyone just stopped. So I just didn't. And throughout that time at uni, as I said, I was teaching there. During an internship, I'd also heard about Girls Programming Network, GPN, which I know you're involved with, Juliana, as well as like some of the other UNSW students now. It's like well known. But when I joined it, it wasn't like within the zeitgeist of UNSW at all. So what I'm trying to say is I was doing this software engineering thing. I was like learning, comp sci, grad job, blah, blah, blah. But alongside that, I was still just teaching. So even when I had my grad job, I was teaching GPN. I was teaching at UNSW still. I was teaching HCI post-grad classes after work. So, I was always still doing it while I was doing the other thing full time. And what made me choose to primarily do it was like I decided I didn't want to have like 4 jobs all the time. So that was one thing. The other thing was that I was having this like reckoning with myself about what it means to be good at something, and like, am I turning away from the tech industry, and like, is that fine? And you know, UNSW is so high performing. You're surrounded by so many incredibly smart people around you, peers, colleagues, everything. Even if you don't think you got a complex, like you got a complex. So I was like, well, if I'm not coding, what am I? Like, you know, people have this with all sorts of hobbies. Maybe sometimes teens go through it as well, where they're like, I'm a swimmer, but I'm not swimming. So can I still call myself a swimmer? Like if I'm not doing the thing that I call myself. So I really had to get over that in order to fully embrace it, because the part of my brain that was like, you know, coding's cool, I can do it. Can I do it? I can do it. Now I'm going to not do it. What does that mean for me? You know, and I had this voice in my head that was like, you can't go full-time with education until you've proven to yourself that you know how to code, which is stupid because you do the degree, you know how to code, it's fine. But I got 2 years into my job, which was the end of the grad program. I'd given myself like a hard stop after 4 years. I was like, you got to leave. If you get to 4 years, you're still there. But I also said, I'll check in at the end of the program. And by that time, an opportunity had arisen. And so that's sort of the why. Well, that's the how. The why is because it was fun, and because I cared about it. And you realize, especially with something like coding, proficiency is only counts for so much. I don't care. Like I just don't. I'm not going to be the one to stay up all night and do the coding project. Like what interests me is, you know, web development. That was my sort of specialty within computer science. I liked the doing of the coding, but unless you're working on a product that you care about, then your day very much becomes this like, wow, I'm so happy because my code works. And then if your code doesn't work, then it's a bad day because your code didn't work, and there's nothing broader that's sort of motivating you. So you're very at the mercy of how good you feel at doing the thing, rather than how good you feel about the product or the problem or the workplace or something like that. So I just realized I didn't need to be on that emotional roller coaster all the time when there was something I knew I did care about. And it turns out by that point, I'd been doing it for long enough that I felt confident to pursue it. You know, I don't have an education degree. I don't have any formal qualifications, but there's something to be said about standing in front of a room full of teenagers and having to hold their attention for 2 hours or 90 minutes. That is an education in and of itself. So it's kind of crazy because I never felt good at coding, even when I was doing it proficiently, but I've always felt pretty comfortable. And I just don't think you need to struggle with yourself that much just to earn money and have a job. So, yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think it's interesting how you speak about that, like kind of complex that I guess everyone has, where you think that if you're not going to be sitting down writing all this code that you learn or you're taught that is like the most important thing at uni, it's like the end of the world kind of thing. But no, it's interesting, especially with that sometimes it is hard to find that kind of broader, I guess, more like what is my purpose? Like, what am I trying to achieve beyond just like working in computer science? So it's good that like you were able to find that quite early as well. Yeah, cool. Another question here. I'm not sure if Mark Chi was your lecturer when you did 1511, but someone's written, who's your favorite Comp 1511 lecturer and why is it Mark Chi?
Oh my God. Mark and I go back further than that, actually. Mark was my HCI tutor in 2015. And yeah, that was the first time that I like had a subject that I liked in its entirety. Like it wasn't just a cool assignment or like I'm learning stuff. It was like, whoa, this is actually really cool. I landed up doing my thesis in HCI actually, but Mark was my tutor at the time, and it was just cool because it was so detached from the nitty-gritty stuff of all the other subjects. And yeah, so then it turns out he's a famous lecturer now. And when he did a live stream a couple months ago, one of the students had they messaged somebody who was on the live stream was like, messaged me being like, hey, Mark mentioned you, or I realized it was you who he mentioned in this stream about like this award. So, you know, as you do with CSC Soc, you join the live stream and you say hello. So then Mark and I like reconnected. It was just this like crazy, like Mark was like, she's here, oh my God. So now, yeah, so we've caught up since then, and it's awesome to see what he's been up to. I didn't take 1511, I took 1917 because I'm old now, and my lecturer was Richard Buckland.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess Mark is my favorite 1511 lecturer.
Nice. Yeah, I guess you kind of answered the favorite UNSW course, I'm guessing. Would it be human computer interaction then?
That's an interesting question. I did really like it at the time. Again, with the complex, you're not allowed to have a favorite subject that isn't technical, otherwise people will tear you down for it. HCI isn't real computing, guys. No, it was really fun. I really liked it. But there were other subjects I liked better, actually. I liked the security engineering course was really fun. And then when I was doing my thesis, there was some like 9 code comp courses that I took that were like super niche and I'd never heard of them before, and they actually landed up being super fun. You guys made me pull out my transcript for the first time in forever just to be like, what did I study again? But the one that I really liked was web data compression and search, which if anybody liked learning C and wants to do a subject that you can do in C, like it's sort of like, here's the project, but you can pick your language. But C is really good for it. It was really fun. It was really cool. It was sort of like you learn about web data, you learn about web data compression, and then you learn about web data search, and then you learn about searching compressed web data. So it's sort of like algos and web and low-level coding all at the same time. So I really like that. The security engineering course was also really cool because it was a bit more like real lifey. It was like solving problems rather than only just coding, and sort of learning, you know, security is its own entire industry, and there's a lot of peripheral knowledge you need to have around, like, you know, politics and geography and international relations and stuff like that, that cause a problem to be what it is. And I found that subject really interesting for that reason as well.
Yeah. I like security this term. It was pretty good. I liked it. Yeah.
I also like how you describe data compression as a real project that you get to work in C, because a lot of people after 151, they're like, oh, we're never going to use C again. It's not widely used in industry, but yeah, that's a good course. Sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, C is good for some things, and I think this course was like a really great example of, you know, unless you're going to be working on a database, like unless you're going to actually be like implementing database systems and searching compressed web data, like you're not really going to choose C from your toolkit to use. But yes, I thought that might be worth mentioning. I don't even know if it's still running. I think the course code was 9319 or something like that, and there weren't too many undergrad prereqs, so have a look. And the lecturer, he also has like a very dry sense of humor. So I really connected with that. He's very funny. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Next question. Oh, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, like in general?
Yeah, it could be.
I think that's a really hard question. I feel like I need a little, like a domain, but I'll, you know, like personal, professional, uni, whatever. I'll try my best. Something did come to mind. I've been thinking a lot about this recently, but I think that confidence is very important. when it comes to your own satisfaction with life. I'm not talking about like confidently present yourself and then you'll get a job. I'm thinking more like if you know what you want and then just back yourself, like all this sort of peripheral stuff that makes you think you should or shouldn't do certain things, or like might prohibit you from behaving in a certain way. I guess I'll give you an example. I'm talking very abstractly right now. A friend of mine is studying a second degree after doing an undergraduate, and they're in totally different fields, you know. And she got an assignment back and had been marked down like 6 out of 20 marks, which you're like, well, that's quite a lot. And it was about the sources. All of, you know, the sources were given to them. They all used the same sources, but she lost 6 marks for the sources. And now that she's like done a degree and she's here learning something she likes, she's like, that's terrible and stupid, and I'm going to contest my mark. Like, just to put it in a uni context. And I was so proud because I'm like, you know, we went through uni together, and at no point, if you get a mark, you're like, you know, they must know something I don't know. I'm wrong. They're definitely, you know, and I know I can see Mark and Hayden are here, so maybe I'm saying, maybe I'm power to the students too much, but you know, you assume your lecturer knows something you don't know about why you got the mark that you got, but you know what you did, and you just got to sort of like follow through instead of just like internalizing the saltiness or feeling hard done by. And you know, I think I spent a long time knowing I like teaching, for example, and knowing that there was a bit of a sort of tension with me in software engineering, but I did the other thing anyway. And I just sort of wonder, like, if I just accepted it earlier, what could have happened. So maybe sort of don't squish your intuition. Yeah, because I think a lot of young people are, you know, especially you go to uni, you're like, I'm here to learn, teach me, what do I know? I'm literally here because I don't know things. I'm paying you to learn things. You can back yourself and just say, like, I know what I did, and like, I know what I want, so I should just do that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's good advice. But I don't think you need to worry too much about how like you realized a bit later, because, you know, I think you realize and like definitely listen to your intuition before a lot of other people would realize the same thing. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice though. Cool. There's a question on here that's, I guess, following on from the teaching side of things. Someone's asked, if you love teaching, why didn't you choose to go down the like PhD masters or do like higher education in like lecturing or anything like that, like sticking with the uni route?
That's a good question. I did a thesis because I wanted to try. Like, I actually did think about that at the time. It was sort of a dual move. You know, I finished high school, I was 17, and then I came into the comp sci degree, which I would have been graduated before I turned 21. And so from like halfway through the degree, I started underloading. It took me an extra semester. So the 3 years took me 3.5. And then I had 6 months off where I had an internship, and I came back and did my thesis. But that decision to do a thesis was like made on the fly, because I was like, man, I don't want to start doing what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, like now, because I'm a child. So at every point I was like, oh yeah, I was starting to realize I like the teaching. And I could see, at least within the UNSW ecosystem, that if you really wanted to, it's not just UNSW, it's the way that the Australian sort of education, tertiary education works, that if you want to, you can sense the difference. Let me put it this way. You can sense the difference between a lecturer who's there to lecture and an academic who has to lecture because it's part of what they do now. You can sense it in their demeanor. You can sense it in the way that they teach. And I definitely am in the camp of the former, where it's like, I like doing this, but apparently I got to do this other thing and become a specialist in something in order to be able to teach whatever. The courses I was teaching at UNSW, just for some context for you, was like Eng 1000, so engineering, design and innovation, 1917, which is 1511 now, computing for engineers, which is the most hilarious and amazing subject ever, computing for designers and HCI. So I was teaching a lot of sort of first year, but broad subjects. And I was also teaching computing to people who were not computer scientists. So now I'm meant to go and get a PhD in human computer interaction so I can keep teaching first year courses. Like it didn't add up. So I did my thesis and I was like, I don't think I could do this academia life just to do this thing that I like. Though I know Hayden has been quite successful at just remaining in the little ecosystem. I think that if I wanted to be a career lecturer, I'd have to be a career academic. Otherwise, I would be at the whim of NSW specifically. Like if it's all experience-based and you don't have the academia to back you, then you're stuck in the place that trusts you as a teacher. Whereas it doesn't translate to another uni, for example, because you don't have, it's just how the funding works. You got to produce research to get funding for, and then, yeah, anyway, so that was that. The other thing was that, you can move to the States and do that kind of stuff, but again, it's tied to research. So yeah, I thought that would be the way to do that. And I thought I'd give it a go and see if it would work for me. And then it didn't. Uni age students are really fun to teach. But when, this opportunity came up that at my current job, I'm teaching mostly high school students. It's different. Like I've taught adults, I've taught kids, I've taught teenagers and uni students. Like it's all different. But I think that there's a benefit when you're at uni and you're teaching. There's a benefit in the proximity and age that sort of is not talked about. You trust me because I'm like a year ahead of you and I still know what's going on in your life. And I can empathize with you in that way and make you feel good and provide guidance that's around the content, but mostly makes you feel seen and understood. And that's what makes somebody feel comfortable to learn. So, the years keep ticking by and the uni students stay the same age, if that makes sense. So I realized that if I was going to keep capitalizing on that sort of similarity in age, you don't necessarily learn how to teach effectively, if that makes sense. So variety has always been interesting to me in that way. The way people learn are very different based on the environment that they're in. Eng 1811, the computing for engineers is a great example actually, because those were students who were not advised to do 1917. So from disciplines of engineering that don't require high level coding skills, or who were not told to do 1911 at the time, which was the slightly less advanced version, or they don't know anything, they don't care, they want to pick the easiest subject, So somebody walking into that classroom has a very different demeanor about them than you, a computer science student, walking into your first compulsory computing 1A lecture. So it interests me how you can connect with people in different ways. And I realized that if I'm going to go back to uni, there's, you stop being believable after a certain point. And yeah, that's sort of it. I was just like, if I just keep doing this, then I'm going to be really good at one small thing. And here's some general advice. You're only as relevant as your skills are necessary, if that makes sense. So I can be really good at teaching one course to uni students, and that will make me really good at teaching one course to uni students. Whereas if I want to be a good educator or a good communicator or a good whatever it is you do, you sort of have to keep feeding yourself a little bit of breadth to make sure that you're good at your craft rather than good at the specific scenario you find yourself in.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. Thank you. Well, we have our next question. Have you ever experienced burnout, and how did you overcome it?
Probably. Okay, cool. A moment came back to me. I was like, yeah, I think so. People talk about burnout in certain terms and ways and stuff, and I don't relate to that in a visceral sense, but I do remember, like, when I was finishing my thesis, I reached the end of the semester and was just like, I'm done. That was probably as close to burnout as I got. It was a combination of, thesis B, needing to write an entire paper, run experiments, do coursework. But there was a course I was in that was completely up in flames. There was issues with a lecturer, and then somebody took over, and then they were meant to not be full. Anyway, long story short, very stressful. Exam remarking across the board, like unilateral disregarding of like a quarter of an exam paper, stuff like that. I'd have some stuff going on like in my life as well at the same time. And I also had a grad job lined up, and I just remember walking out of this exam being like, see you next year. Everything's up in flames. It doesn't matter. I'm going overseas tomorrow. It's fine. Like, it's not, but it is. My family had all gone overseas already, and I just got home and I like was meant to pack, and I just lay on the floor and I was like, damn, it's fine. And like, but I was already over it. I was like, I already knew that was awful and terrible, and I had nothing left in the tank. I was just like treading water the whole time. And I'm like, well, you tread water the whole time, don't expect to have won the race at the end. You know what I mean? So yeah. And how I overcame it, is that the second half of the question? Yeah, I mean, I took some time off. I think when you find yourself burned out at uni, the problem is you have to keep doing it. And so it can be really hard. I don't want to be like, oh, take some time off. You're like, cool, it's week 6. Like, there's nothing I can do. Yeah, it's hard. I think you got to sort of look above, as if you're like watching yourself in your life, and just go like, what's working, what's not. And it's hard because you got to take stock of like bad habits you don't realize you have. If you find yourself in a Instagram scroll or something, like wasting time, like I know that at uni, I took advantage of my bad habits to actually get stuff done which is, I mean, I'll freely admit that. I knew that if I left small amounts of time before the assignment was due, then I just have to do it. That's bad. That's not good. But it worked. And so because that's so bad, but I knew it worked. So I kept doing it that way instead of like trying to sort of improve the system. Things come at you so fast. You're like, yeah, I'm going to get into better habits. And you do until like week 4, and then you fall off the horse. And then, I don't know. I just don't think that the process of sort of optimizing your life and process while it's occurring is meaningful. So if you are able to sort of step outside of yourself or take a break, take stock at the end of semester, and look holistically, not just like what was wrong with yesterday or like why things done. You sort of got to look at the whole thing, and also just be like nice to yourself, because sometimes we're so mean to ourselves and our brains are so mean to us, and they're just like, you're terrible and you didn't do any work and therefore you're terrible. And like, it's just crazy. Like that's not going to help. Like, when was the last time being told you're bad at something helped you get it done? Like, it's just not right. So getting your head right and like actually being honest with how you're talking to yourself, how you're communicating with yourself, that can really help, because you're like, you know, pull the mask off and it's you underneath, like, oh, it was me all along who was making this terrible for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's good advice, especially at end of trimester now. It's a good time for people to just take a step back every day. A lot of people blame themselves as well, like measuring their success day to day on like whether or not they got XYZ done. But yeah, it's, I guess now that it's all over for the term, most people have finished their exams. I think it's a good time to take a step back. So it's good advice. Yeah. There's quite an interesting and slightly difficult question here, so just brace yourself, I guess. So is there a lot of pressure with being such a highly regarded role model to so many young women looking to getting into the tech industry?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll be honest, it's pretty crazy. It's work I love. It's work I enjoy. And I struggle sometimes because you want to be everything to everyone. And when you can see yourself in somebody, or you can see something in their struggle that you are familiar with, or like you've dealt with, or even if it's not personal, like I haven't gone through this, but I've seen somebody else go through this, you know, you feel like the only resource available. And I just have been trying to learn that that's not true. And also it's not good if that's the case. So it's hard because I do not like leaving people out. Like, I don't like leaving people strung out to dry. But I have had to just be intentional about like what I do and don't take on. As I traverse changing environments, like the parameters around that change. So, you know, for example, when I was working in my grad job in this grad program for tech people, you know, then there's a little ecosystem in that, and there are women who exist there, and you're the one that they sort of come to. But then you leave that environment, and then like you might stay in contact, but there's somebody else now, or like they are that person to other people. So it's sort of like I don't regard myself so highly that I believe that I am the only thing that can solve people's problems. That's so not true, and also so not fair to like them or me. As for the pressure, it's hard because I think you inadvertently set up expectations around yourself. Like, you know, when I say I mentor people and then I became highly regarded. It wasn't the other way around. So now, if anything, that's sort of a bit of a shield because you can almost be like, sorry, you know, I'm busy now. If that makes sense. So I wasn't doing any of it because I was highly regarded. I became highly regarded because I was doing it. And within the uni context, like it was tireless work, you know, like when I left uni, I received the Anita Borg Award. And that was when I'd started my new job. And that award's for like promoting women in computer science and stuff. But I spent 4 years like tirelessly working because I wanted to and because I cared. And then later it became like notable. But at the time you're like doing work that, I don't know, there's being highly regarded and then there's like showing up every day. And those are two different things. So I think people forget that, you know, awards are what they are. And being reputable and being good at your job, it's like, that's just the badge on your resume now. Like that's just the sort of key you can use to unlock the expectation that you have experience with certain things. But there was a time where like I was just a student and I had a job and that involved this. And now it matters, or like in retrospect it matters, but I wasn't doing it for that reason. So the pressure is funny because the pressure wasn't there at the beginning. The pressure's only there now. Like I wasn't going to class every day and being like, how can I be a role model for young women? I was just like, how can I teach this lesson? Or like, how can I make sure somebody doesn't feel bad about like the imminent assignment or whatever? So yeah, it can be hard. But I think people are getting more comfortable with like saying no now, or like hearing no's. And I just remember that, you know, some people ask and some people guess. I don't know if you've sort of come across that dichotomy before, but there are people, the askers will be like, I don't know, it's that friend maybe that you had growing up who's like opens your fridge in your house and like looks for snacks and you're like, what are you doing? Oh my God, what is this? But they don't think they're doing anything wrong. That's just like how they are. And then the guessers will be like angling that maybe they're hungry and sort of be like, whoa, you know, look how late it is. Recess was so long ago. And you're like, yeah, it was. And like that's it. Like, so there's a different way that people approach things. And I always just remind myself that if somebody's asking for access to my time or like asking me a question, it's because they're just being themselves and it's fine. But I don't need to actually answer that question by giving more access. I can just be like, hey, here's this book, or like this person said this thing really interestingly, or I'll hit up a friend and be like, you know, you got to provide opportunities for others too. So be like, hey, this person's looking for this. Like, do you think you'd be open to that? So I've sort of become a bit more like a resource hub than the resource, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I guess because you do so much education though too, like you now have, like you've created resources and like you've made connections with other people where you have that ability. So it's like, I guess, learning to encompass that new skill, which is pretty cool.
True. I think authors like get this a lot where an interviewer or whatever, like will be like, hey, so can you tell me a little bit more like about this book? And they're like, or you can read it. Like, you know, now you've got things you can point to that speak on your behalf, instead of having to repeat yourself, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Cool. There's a question here about what other options might exist beyond becoming just a software engineer for a CS student. So maybe any paths similar to education where you find yourself not just doing the same monotonous thing, I guess, every day.
For CS students or
Yeah.
just,
So,
oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I will say just about the work that I do, you know, I could have gone and been like a high school IT teacher or whatever, but I still crave that sort of variety in my work. So I think there's something unique to be said about that. Like, you know, the paths, there are numerous. But what I like telling my students, especially because they're all like young girls picking electives for the first time and stuff, when you do computer science, you might do it because you like it already. You might do it because you think it's interesting, because you can have a lucrative career, because it's entrepreneurial, because the skills will always be needed. And because like the zeitgeist culture, people around you are like, wow, you can code. That's amazing. Like it's now just the thing that seems hard and cool, and you can travel and you can whatever. But isn't it cooler to just be able to do all of that and then choose not to do it? That's a big flex. That's a really odd flex, honestly. Like, I don't need my students to become software engineers. I just need them to like try coding and decide if they like it or not. And that I think you can apply to uni too, because we go to uni thinking that we will pick our life's direction. And we have to study the right thing, otherwise we won't have the right career. But, you know, people who are at that end of their career, they're not referencing the things that they learned at uni anymore. Like the curriculums have changed, the industry has changed, things are moving and shaping all the time. So there's this like false dichotomy that we have in our minds about like, if I don't do the right thing at uni, I'll never be able to do anything else with my life. And I just think that's not true. So the answer is really anything. But anything that involves learning, computer science students, I think, find very easy, because I'm just going to say it, you're learning really hard stuff all the time. Like, even if you think that you're stupid because it's not easy to you, you're still learning it. And so you're good at learning. That's, uni taught me how to learn things. It taught me languages and stuff. And it taught me about teaching, but it also taught me how to learn. So I find learning really interesting, because you know how to sort of take in information, synthesize it, see it in small scenarios, big scenarios, like really micro, macro level. Yeah, so I think you shouldn't be worried about what career you can have after computer science, because first of all, industry loves engineers to do any other job. Like, they're like, engineers know how to be, know how to learn, know how to do. So, you know, you can be an engineer and then go into finance, and they'll be like, wow, amazing, an engineer, you're so smart. Like, engineering is as well like its own little sort of dog whistle that means so many other things. So yeah, but if we're talking like actual, if you can code, then you can also talk to people who code. Like, you don't have to be the one writing the code. You can be a business analyst, you can be a product owner, you can be a UX designer, you can be an interaction designer, a hardware designer. Like, you can do so many cool things. You can be a creative, you can work on like strategy, you can, I don't know what, advertising agencies hire software engineers to make like installations and products. Like, you can basically do anything. And I think the interesting thing is approaching people and saying, what would you have me do if I worked for you? Like, if you're not sure, but there's a company you think is cool, you can always just send them an email, find somebody to message and be like, hey, here's what I've got. Like, if you had access to me, what would you make me do? Like, what do you think is cool that I know? So yeah, so anything. But if you were looking for some more like discrete answers, there's everything surrounding like product development. You can go into, yeah, basically anything. I feel that engineering, and specifically software engineering, what it tells people is that you know how to problem solve, you know how to learn, you know how to communicate and work in a team. Like that's what it means. So any jobs that say those things, you can probably do.
Well, I think that was a really good answer. Like in computer science, you're learning all the time, even though you're not like learning for courses, you're still self-learning when you're coding. So that's a really good skills. And as long as you can learn, you can do any job.
Exactly. And, you know, the people who we find interesting and who we see as visionaries and we learn from, they very rarely have a straight path that they've taken. And they're like, I'm a plumber and I've been a plumber my whole life and now I'm an inspirational plumber. It's like, first I did this and then I did this and then I did this. And that's why you're listening to me. So yeah, I think it's more interesting to do different things.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. If you could go into a completely different industry, not tech or education, what would it be?
I've always joked that I'd be a good hairdresser because I just talk. And like, then you got a captive audience. Yeah, I don't know. I have thought about this before. When I was going through school, I thought I wanted to do like architecture actually, and like yeah, and I thought that, and I did my work experience in architecture mostly because my grandpa like builds architectural models, and I thought that was very cool. But probably something physical, like using my hands, because I am quite a practical person. So yeah, whether it's model building or something else, like yeah, I wouldn't mind having a physical job. Like I used to work in pharmacy when I worked in pharmacy for about 8 years during high school and all throughout uni. And it's a really interesting field too, like customer service combined with like, what's the word, sort of supply chain and like health and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel my issue is I could be happy doing anything if it's like I could be happy doing anything. So yeah, something with my hands and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Hairdresser is a good one when you like to just like have combos and chit chat all the time.
Yeah, and like you can do it anywhere. No one's like, oh, well, you're a hairdresser in Australia, so you're going to need to re-qualify to be a hairdresser somewhere else. So
yeah, and it's still a bit creative too. So it
totally.
Could work. Maybe do it on the side.
Something nice about feeling like physically tired at the end of the day, and like anybody who's worked in hospo or like customer service knows that just being on your feet does that to you. So I don't know, I feel more like mentally tired at the end of the day than physically tired. So yeah.
Cool. There's a question here about what your current job is and how you got into that.
Yeah, I can spruik it. So my current job is I'm a technology lead at a company called Creatable. Creatable is a tech ed company. I joined just over a year ago. And my role there has sort of changed a lot over time. What they hired me in to do was be the technical teacher for the in-schools program that they were running. So those are the high school students I mentioned teaching. But I joined on the 8th of March, and then we all know what happened a week later. So they had to basically completely, I say they, I mean me. I had to rewrite the syllabus because all the projects that were technical were physical and hands-on. We were doing soldering, 3D modeling, 3D printing. And so I had to sort of write this new syllabus while all of our students were at home, that was teaching creative technology. So it's not just tech, it's like creative technology. Yeah, so I had to write a creative technology syllabus. So I actually got into sort of like, I don't know what you'd call it. Curriculum design is probably what you'd call it on LinkedIn, but like creating programs for students to learn from. So I was investigating the technologies, writing project, producing lesson plans and teaching them. And now that is the syllabus that we use in the schools. So that's what I was doing in the first half of last year. We also had a partnership with UNICEF where we were developing a curriculum for the nation of Burundi in Africa, which is the second poorest country in the world and a small landlocked country in between DRC and Rwanda. Basically piloting, the UNICEF program targets young people in the second decade of life, so age 10 to 20, and they were sort of like, if we can make it work in Burundi, we can make it work anywhere. So we were writing this syllabus about engineering and entrepreneurship for young people in a way that would particularly elevate women's lives. So I was doing a lot of like educational program development of the developing world, which was totally new for me as well. So we came up with some really awesome projects and, you know, a whole new set of constraints. We were actually meant to go there, but couldn't because of COVID. So I like wrote a textbook, and I was the one who was sort of translating we had an engineering team that was testing the projects that we decided on. So I was helping decide what projects to do. They would implement them and test them and see whether they were achieving the aims. I would translate their like results into meaningful learning materials for a year 8 student in Burundi. We wrote a textbook. We filmed some videos of us sort of teaching. So we were doing like a train the trainer thing. All these teachers came and learned from us. So I was like on camera doing like, hello, welcome to this. So yeah, so as you can see already, like definitely like progression and moving, you know, I didn't think that's what we'd be doing. At the same time, I was hosting like interviews on Instagram Live every week or twice a week for our students at home with like inspiring young people and professionals in different industries and stuff to get them engaged with their futures. It's easier to tell you like what I do than like what the job is, because it's sort of like very big variety. Now what we're doing is creating a teacher professional development product. So an online, back to web dev, making a product for teachers to learn future skills from like big inspiring tech companies. So like, what does industry need, and how can we get teachers to teach that? So it's sort of like I'm educating people directly, and I'm educating educators to sort of get you know, for students through teachers. And there was another project where we adapted electronic toys for kids with disabilities around Sydney. So yeah, it's just like project work, but in education and engineering and like all of that combined. So that's my job. Yeah. So I was originally a creative technologist, but now I'm the tech lead there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Well, we have now next question. That's kind of funny. I'm guessing the student has some experienced semesters. So they asked, what was semesters like at UNSW?
I feel like I need to know what trimesters are like before I describe what semesters are like. They were long. They were really, really long. But yeah, like, I guess I realized they were long when I first got to uni, because you're used to a 10-week school term. And so you get to week 10 and you're like, I'm done now. But then you're like, no, I'm really, really not. So yeah, semesters were good. I feel like the way that I learn, like the way that I know something, takes a lot longer than the 14-week semester. So I would often feel very like, oh, you want to test me, but like, I don't quite get it to the point that I can answer this assessment, but in 4 weeks, like it's in there, like I'll get it. So my learning cadence was definitely out of whack with semesters. But I can't imagine that would have been helped with trimesters. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's really hard to learn something completely new and also discrete. Like I've found and I find that uni subjects, they're their own little thing. And once you've learned it, you're done, and you never revisit it unless it's a prerequisite. And even so, it doesn't even really connect. And that's hard. Like learning discrete things, but going in such a deep learning about it and such a variety of domains across computer science is very challenging. So, you know, semesters are hard. I think that I did my best work when I started underloading. I was doing 3 subjects per semester for 2 years. So I did 3 semesters full-time, 4 semesters underload. It meant I could have a job and not do badly. And I found that full-time study within computer science, at least, there's always something on the back burner. I actually started in an electrical engineering degree. So the whole first year was like electrical physics, like lots of different stuff. So your brain can't, like, I don't know, it can't do it. So when I started underloading, I'm like, here is the space I needed to actually learn effectively. And I also took music subjects as gen eds. So that was great. And I would encourage anybody who has, like, you know, in high school, I was the music person. So you know, I could have done that as a degree, but I didn't. I had enough technical knowledge to sort of jump into first year music subjects. And it's a good break. Like, if you're going to learn something different, learn something very different, not something that's like sort of the same, but not really close enough that you'll get confused, but not so close that they actually work together. So I found that quite helpful as well. But yeah, semesters, I would just always find them incredibly long. But then it's worth it because your break is like forever, and then you forget, and then it's next year, so it's fine.
Yeah, I think our break right now has probably got about 2.5 weeks left before we go back to a trimester. So
Wow.
I don't think it feels long enough, but yeah, it is a lot to learn, I guess, in the 10 weeks. And I think underloading, it is good advice if people have flexibility to do that. Like, I think there might be like a bit of stigma, I guess, around like constantly forcing yourself to do like the 3 or 4 courses a time.
I mean, I don't want to say that's good advice now, because I don't know what trimesters are like, and maybe, you know, maybe underloading now isn't what it was before, but I felt that the space I had in just becoming older and like having time, all the stuff that was happening around uni is what makes you like you. So it was the same thing when I realized I'd graduate really early. I was like, I don't think I'm done like transforming and growing. So yeah, I'm not saying underload because I don't know what the effect is. Like, the effect for me was that I'd have an extra 6 months, and then it just so happened to work out that I could spend the second 6 months doing an internship. So I don't know. Yeah, it was like, if you underload for 4 semesters, that's 1 subject per semester. So you do 1 extra semester. Like, yeah. Anyway.
I think it's a good idea because like, even with trimester, you can still be learning 3 different programming languages at the same time. And yeah, it's hard.
Is that not enough? Like, really?
Yeah, it is a lot. Yeah, the next question is another tricky one. This one, it's asking if you have an opinion, I guess, on why you think there's a gender imbalance in tech and engineering.
Look, I've got a pretty good answer to this because I think the history is a lot longer than people understand. Like, you can say, why is there a gender imbalance in history, and say, oh, because tech companies aren't treating women correctly. And like, yeah, that's true. Or like, oh, young people aren't getting into STEM. Yeah, it's true. But if you learn the history of like the inception of the computer and how computing came to be, like, you learn about the history of computer science, you can actually see that there was a shift in the sort of classification of technical work. It used to be administrative. Women used to do it. Women were called computers. Like back in the day, like when computers were first coming to the fore, it was considered a secretarial role. It was considered administrative work. And then as soon as it becomes something that underpins every other aspect of society, it started becoming a technical job. And then men sort of came into the industry. So, I mean, that's a gross oversimplification. But if you want to learn about why it happened, you know, you can dip your toe in the news at night and say, oh, why did this thing happen today? But like, history continues, you know, and I think learning about how tech came to be, that's still modern history. Like, we're not talking like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Like, you can go read about who invented the internet and like how that began and what languages came out first and who worked on them and what companies began and who was there and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a history lesson. It's a bit of a stupid thing to say, but like that's what causes everything else. Everything else we're seeing today is like a bit of a symptom, and how culture sort of moves around it, and moves around the history. There are very modern instances of the issue. Like, yes, you can go into a workplace and see there are fewer women, but it's not just because that workplace has fewer women, if that makes sense. It's not like the definition's not in the problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we actually had an AMA with Nikki Ringland before, and she explained like the pipeline issue from like, because women used to dominate the computer science field, like because they're doing calculation, they're good at calculation, and then suddenly just became man dominated, and then women actually are scared to started studying for the field. So that's why the industry is men dominated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, underpinning that is like the history of women in the workforce generally. You know, these things, you go back, like women only were able to work because like there was war and there were soldiers and they were men. And so the women had to do the work that weren't being done. And then with the invention of household devices, like the washing machine, you stop having, like, you can reduce the amount of labor that's required in the home. Like it's history. Like it's not a today's cultural problem. It's like, this is what happens when things happen and nobody sort of catches it at the beginning, and it spirals out of control. So yeah, I'm glad that you spoke to Nikki Ringland. She's a very inspiring person. And like, you know, you speak to the right people and they'll say it's history, go read a book, like, but you speak to the wrong people and they'll be like, oh, it's because my boss is mean to me. And like, yeah, it's true, but that didn't cause the problem. The problem is so old and so complicated, that all these, how do we solve this? How do we solve that? It's like, man, we need to understand it better first. And then we actually need to come up with like creative solutions that sort of acknowledge where it's come from, acknowledge where we'd like for it to go. And you got to hold all of that in your mind when you try and talk about this at all. So, I mean, there's a great book by Claire L. Evans, who is an amazing, she's actually a musician, but she's also a science historian. I heard her speak at Town Hall a couple of years ago. She's got a book called Broadband. It's like got a byline about the untold stories of women in the internet or something like that. So if anybody's like, what can I go do? Read that book, Broadband, by Claire Evans. It's great. It tells you all the things that you don't know about, like zines online and like message boards when you used to have to order the computer and it was all wired, and like, it's just amazing. It's amazing history. So I think, you know, we got to learn at uni about like skills so we can have a job, but the industries themselves like exist, they predate like, our learning journey.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What's the most practical tip you have for women facing condescending behavior from men?
Yeah, that's hard. I was very bad at that at uni. I would just sort of take it on. I think the problem is that you think it's you, and like when you don't have enough women around to sort of commiserate with and draw the connections between the, you know, Hannah Gadsby has this in her one comedy set. She talks about these gendered issues, and she's like, all the men in the room are like completely isolated incident, you know, that's not, oh, somebody said something condescending to me, all the men are like completely isolated. That guy specifically is an asshole when he said that one sentence. Like, you need people around you that will believe your like lived experience and validate you. So yeah, I'm not going to be like, oh, confront them or like, oh, educate them, because it's not your job. Like, if someone's mean to you, goodbye. Like, I have no time anymore for things like this. And I know it's hard because you have to go through a lot of that stuff to sort of just be like, you know what, you'll work it out or you won't. I've got people that are far more invested in like this generally. that I'd rather dedicate my time to sort of talking to and stuff like that. So, you know, if it's egregious and rude and, you know, inappropriate, then that's a totally different story. But a condescending comment, it's like, it's sad to say, but like when somebody says, oh, what's it like to be a woman in tech? I'm like, it's great because you bond with all the other women in tech. Like it becomes its own, it's a meme of itself. Like the women in tech experience is being a woman in tech. Like it's awful when people say those things. And I think nobody ever thinks they're being malicious. Like, unless they are being like, you're like, I'm saying something rude to you right now. Nobody thinks that they're harming you. And that's sort of worse because you're like, you know, you can be a good person and say a stupid thing and you're still a good person. Like I'm not casting like value judgments on people that say these things because everybody's part of the same system. Like I'm just on the side that will receive the comment and you're on the side that will make it. Like it's the same system that hurts us all. So I think when you can become a little bit at peace with that, it's almost funny. You're like, you would say that actually. You would think that, like you would think that. You know, I've had comments in the past from friends and loved ones, you know, who question you like, oh, you only got this job because, or, oh, well, they only like you because, or they're, you know, they're only helping you because, and you're like, you would say that because you think that, and that's awful. Like but it's funny, you know, when somebody who you know is like that says that, you're like, surprise me next time, say something smarter next time. Like, I don't know. It just reminds me, like when I meet people, they hear my name, sometimes they'll be like, oh, Hannah Montana, like, oh, Hannah Banana. You're like, you know what? I've had my name my whole life. And you said the first thing that came to your head and you think it's funny to me, who has been this the whole time, you know? So somebody says something condescending to you, you're like, this is my life. Like you think you can hurt me, but you can't. Like come up with something more creative next time, if nothing else. So if you can laugh at it, I mean, I'd love for it not to happen, but the very least you can do is control how you respond to it. Clementine Ford has this thing about like creative insults or cussing someone out creatively, which I just think is hilarious. So, you know, come up with some fun and spunky things to say, even if it's just like, oh, you would say that. Like, then they'll be like, what do you mean I would say that? And you're like, you would say that. It's just like derail it, stop it from being what it is, like jump out of the moment and just sort of hold up the mirror and be like, you see this? It's you. You're the one that said this. It's just so stupid. That's not a good answer, but I hope that at least makes someone feel better, whoever asked the question.
Yeah. Or even just like realizing that it isn't you, like in a lot of those situations, like at all, it's 100% on the other person. I think that would be like a good thing to just take from that.
Totally. And when you say it's not just you, like it's also not you personally. Like they're saying this to you personally, but they think that about everyone who is the category that they're putting you into. So it only takes so many comments before you can stop taking it personally, because you take it personally because you're like, wow, they think I'm dumb, or, oh, wow, they really don't think I deserve my spot here, or like, oh, they really think somebody else more deserving got that job. You're like, I actually don't think it's me. Like, it's really not me. It's just that generally they believe that this situation shouldn't have happened. You can sub me out for any other woman of my, you know, physicality and education level and like all those things that actually make the comment contextual. And they'd say the same thing. So yeah, don't take it on as a personal failing, because it's not.
That's good advice. Yeah. There's a question here saying that there's a person who's been inspired by the work that you do for women in tech and STEM, and how can I, as a male, be a good ally to women in a male-dominated industry?
That is lovely. Thank you for saying that. I think a lot of men struggle. Like, it's hard, and you can take that in a practical and expansive direction, or you can take that in like life's unfair and woe is me and I'm going to be awful about it direction. So I appreciate that you're committing to not being a silent bystander in the situation we find ourselves in. I have a few pieces of advice here. I think that men who are interested should pursue that interest with other men. You know, you can, if you go and ask your one girlfriend these questions all the time, that's a problem. Like that's, you want to be someone's friend, not their like resource. So you don't want to go and like bug the people in your life. What you want to do is take an interest in their lives generally. So just be friends with women, be friends with diverse people, understand their life scenario, and not in the what's it, you know, this is a microphone, what's it like to be a woman in technology, just more like, how was your day? Or like, if you're in a meeting with a coworker and you notice something, just be like, hey, how did you feel about that meeting? Like you can be embedded in someone's life and learn about them and thus learn about the issues that they face without having to ask them direct questions. And when I say men should learn with other men, the reason I say that, it's not like I'm excluding you from this little zone. What I'm saying is all men are experiencing the same existential question, which is like, how do I engage with this? And so when you're in the same realm as somebody, it's really helpful to learn alongside others. That's a general statement. Like you learn best with others, you learn best in groups, you learn best with people who are at the same point in their learning journey as you. So it's not an exclusionary thing. It's just more like I'm trying to help you learn best. And there are groups out there. I am thinking of one in particular on Meetup called Male Champions of Change, which is run by the Project F. So Project F is like a gender equity in the workplace consulting sort of HR agency. They have a few meetups. One of them is called the F Factor. It's for women in tech. One of them is called Male Champions of Change. And they talk about and learn about being an ally to women in tech, the problems that face men due to gender imbalances and issues in the workplace. So the hot button topic, I guess, in that context is like parental leave and other things that happen as a result. So, you know, we can say women are imbalanced and women face issues in the workplace, but the other side of the coin is that like men are expected to do certain things and be a certain way at the same time. It's the same problem. So I think having an environment which will help you feel that your problems are valid and that it's all the same problem, by sort of sidestepping the way that it will affect you in order to sort of change your life in a way that will subvert these issues or help solve these issues, will also solve the issues for the women in your life. So yeah, that's the broad strokes advice. I mean, I could sit here and say like, throw to your female colleague in a meeting, but like, it's helpful, it's a band-aid, but like, if you really want to like learn more and do better and help women, don't tokenize the issue. Don't think that they owe you their time when you ask them, because it becomes like it's like a second job to answer these questions. And then you're creating the scenario that you're trying to avoid. So yeah, I think learn more, learn among peers, talk to your male friends about it. And then just be friends with women, as in don't go out and find women to be friends with, but like be a genuine friend to a person, and be a genuine friend to anybody, and they will open up to you and make them feel like you're a safe person. So I find that if you're out there and you go surfing every morning and your friends know you go surfing, then if one of your friends wants to start surfing, then they know that they can talk to you about that and maybe come with you and all that kind of stuff. So if you are like, I'm a dude and I care about this women in tech problem, I'm going to read some books. I'm going to listen to people who are experiencing this talk about it. I'm going to go to a meetup group. I'm going to talk to my male friends about it. Other people will see that and then take you on like as a safe person to engage with. So it doesn't need to be about proving to somebody that you care or showing women that you're trying. It's a very internal journey to go on. So just get ready for that.
I think those are some really good advices. Thank you. And I really agree with that. Like if you just go and ask a female friend, like, how do you feel about this? It's you're doing the opposite. Like might as well just be friends with them and then yeah, be a genuine friend. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly. And if you're engaged with women generally and you're friends to women generally, you will hear about their lives generally. And like it's hard because sometimes these things that women face, like in the workplace or in the tech industry, you don't want to talk about it. Like, you know, you have a shit experience at work and your friend's like, how was that for you? And you're like, I actually just want to go home. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I especially don't want to talk to you about it. And it's just like, if you're someone's friend, like that's how you engage already. Like, hey, how was your day? Oh my God, this terrible thing happened, you know, but it's not like, you don't want to force somebody to talk about something that's like traumatic and terrible and not fun, and force them into a position where they feel that they have to do that. It's more about caring than showing you care. Yeah,
that was a really good example. All right, we have our next question. This is kind of fun. What was your favorite course to tutor?
Oh, that's hard. I think it would be HCI or the computing for engineers. HCI is fun, especially the postgrad classes, because postgrads, they want to learn. They're like, I'm I'm like 30, I'm like 60, I'm here to like learn some stuff. So they engage in quite an academic way with what you're teaching, and there's a lot more dialogue. Whereas I think undergraduate students, for example, they're like, I'm going to sit quietly and take notes and then like do the work and like, hey, can you help me, and like check it over. So yeah, I really like teaching HCI. I thought the content was interesting, so then I taught it in an interesting way. But I really like teaching computing for engineers, which is not going to mean anything to anyone because no computer science student has to take that course. But I like teaching it because you have so much room to change their perspective. As I said, they come in like knowing nothing, not wanting to, thinking it's easy or like hating it. And so that, you're like below the x-axis at that point. And so you can really take them on this journey of like, not only not only is this hard, but you can do it and it's helpful. So when you start to, when you're confident enough in your ability to do something, you can start understanding why it's important or cool. And so I really like that. And I also think like the subject had a pretty high fail rate when I was there. And so sometimes it's terrible to say, but like you get a rapport with the students, and I just remember like I was assisting on a lab with somebody, and like the one student in the class generally realizes that the assistant doesn't know everyone, so people won't ask them, so they can be the one to ask you, and then they'll have you for like the whole 2 hours. So there's a little tidbit for you. If there's an assistant tutor in the class, be that person. And there was a guy in one of the classes I was assisting, and he was just like not having it, really struggling, but also like not applying himself. And I'm like, mate, like, what do you expect here? We got a pretty good rapport. And then the next semester I show up to class, and he walks in the door and he's like, hey, ready to do it again? I'm like, oh my God, like you're killing me here. But like, you really just like sort of go on a bit of a journey. Some people save the subject to do when they're in their final year, because it's easier than all of their like super technical civil stuff or like super technical mining. And then they're like, get a bit of a slap in the face and they're like, please help me. But by that point, they're like old enough to sort of understand that you can ask that and receive that. So I feel like I enjoyed that one because I had to learn the content too. Like I hadn't taken the subject, I had to learn it to teach it. So it was fun to like learn that stuff. At the time it was Open Office Calc, Open Office Basic, and MATLAB. So Open Office Calc and Open Office Basic are like Excel and VBA for those playing along at home, with just like really minor syntax changes to confuse people who've done it before. So you're learning 3 different technologies. You're like, when you're learning the first one, you're cool. When you're learning the second one, you're doing the assignment on the first one. When you're learning the third one, you're doing the assignment on the second one. So you got to hold a lot of syntax in your head. And like for students that are not comp sci, not technical, not syntax inclined, it can get quite confusing. So sort of like helping those it's like an educational issue rather than like a understanding of the content thing. You're like, I need to actually teach this in a way that's like really, really cool and helpful. I also liked it because they called them labs, not tutorials. So I didn't have to teach a lesson, which meant that when you're engaging with the students, it's really one-on-one or like in a group setting. So yeah.
It sounds interesting for sure. Cool. There's a question about advice that you would give people who are more interested than teaching than becoming an engineer. So maybe what type of experience or resources they should turn to.
So these, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to like, this is like a comp sci student who's like, now I'm more interested in teaching.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that kids learning comp sci is like such a thing now. So just go do it. Like it's so fun. And as I said, like nobody values coding skills like people who are not in that industry. There are so many like after school education programs available, holiday workshops, camps, like one-on-one tutoring services where you can just go and be a teacher, and they expect it to be young people who do that. So, you know, it would be remiss of me to say go and do a teaching degree because I didn't do that. So what I'm saying is like education experience is everything. You know, some teachers get to the end of the degree and you've done like 3 placements and you still don't have a handle on like what that is like to be in front of people and like have to know things. And yeah, so just go do it. It's really fun. Like it's often easy to sort of work around a uni schedule. Try get a role tutoring at uni if you can. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like with everything, once you're in, you're in. And so if you manage to get a role one term or become close with like a certain academic or lecturer, like they'll keep asking you to come back. So yeah, start investing in some experience, because if you're committed to continuing with the computer science degree, and obviously like that's what helped me. I'm not teaching like magic, I'm teaching computer science. Like I still had to learn the thing to teach it. Don't think that you can't be an educator just because you're doing a comp sci degree. Also, master's in education is only 2 years now. So finish your comp sci degree and do a master's, and then you'll be a teacher. Like it's not actually a long time. So yeah, when you do the undergrad in teaching, you have to pick a subject, or you're like, I'm going to be primary teaching or high school teaching. Also, whoever you are who asked this question, like just hit me up, because sometimes teaching opportunities come up. So I'll be able to sort of connect you. So yeah, you can find me on the internet.
Thanks for that. Yeah, tutoring for CSE definitely is a good idea. It's a good place to start. Definitely just apply. Absolutely. Yeah. I like this question. We've always asked this question to our AMA guests. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Oh yeah. I've heard a few different. I was actually I don't stream. Like I've done podcasts and like I interview people, but I've never like streamed. So I was actually watching Hayden's stream just to like calm myself. And so I saw the whole pineapple on pizza fiasco. So I'm just, yeah, I love pineapple on pizza. In fact, my favorite pizza, which is like, if you don't like pineapple on pizza, close your ears now. My favorite pizza is actually pineapple and olives on pizza. Yeah, I'm like, not only yes, and yes, and olives. Thank you.
It's like the 2 controversial foods together.
100%.
That's interesting. There's another compulsory question: whether a hot dog is a sandwich.
So one of my favorite podcasts is called the Judge John Hodgman podcast, and this has been like an ongoing point of inquiry, and the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. So I mean, I'm sure you've heard all of this, like you know, hot dogs have specific bread, and if you put if you put salad and cheese on a hot dog roll, it's a sandwich, so hot dogs must be a sandwich. You can go down that route of like the hot dog bun is specific and it's actually connected on both sides, so it's got its own specific purpose. You can say that not all sandwiches use 2 pieces of bread, which is true, but I raise you would cut a sandwich in half and share it with a friend. but you would never, ever cut a hot dog in two and share it with your friend, thus proving that a hot dog is not a sandwich.
It's fair enough.
That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah. I'm
Maybe-
like, question's been answered, no further questions.
Maybe someday I will cut a hot dog in half and share with my friend.
That's weird, man.
Just to disprove that one statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, I don't think your friend would be like, wow, thanks for that sandwich. They'd be like, what did you do to your poor hot dog?
All right, okay, we're having enough fun. Well, I like this question as well. Have you had a chance to connect with any of your ex-students in the same way that you reconnect with Mark?
Oh, yeah, all the time, actually. The thing with teaching from so early on in my degree is that like some of the students like became tutors themselves or like are my friends now. So it would actually take a little bit of like cognition in my brain to figure out, like I can think of like 2 friends off the top of my head who were students, but then became like real friends. Yeah, and as for like the ones who aren't like my real friends now, like people come up all the time, like whether you just sort of bump into them in the community. The tech community of Sydney is small, the women in tech community is even smaller. So like I come across people really often. A lot of my students find me on LinkedIn or like have over the years added me on Facebook and stuff. So yeah, I connected with students after the fact quite a lot. Yeah, I don't know if that, as I said, I don't know if it's like the age thing, or if, you know, I wasn't a lecturer, so I was like, you can add me after term, like it's fine. But yeah, so yeah, I have. It's really nice actually, because I don't remember like what I said in that lesson or like how I taught these things, but they're like, oh, you did this and it was so good, and like I use this now, and I'm like, cool. I'm glad you remember. Like I'm glad something stuck with you, you know. So yeah, no, it's lovely. I love it. I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me everything. Like, what are you doing now?
Yeah, it's nice, definitely. So someone's asked, why did you personally choose UNSW instead of USyd or UTS or the likes?
Oh, that's a very bad answer to that question, but my school's like around the corner. So I sort of like grew up around UNSW. Like when I was little, my dance recitals were UNSW. So I'm like, it's right there. And the, you know, the engineering faculty is world class. I know once you're in, you're like, meh, is it? I don't know. But, you know, when you're looking at unis, you're like, wow, this is great. It's the best one in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's right in my door, like in my backyard. So there was that, like, and the other thing was I didn't know what discipline of engineering I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do engineering. So I literally put all my preferences as like this engineering at UNSW, this engineering, blah, 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 blah. So they all had like the same sort of entry mark and stuff. I'd also applied for co-op and in electrical engineering. Yeah, it's rude. I didn't look around, like it's just rude of me, but it worked out well.
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, this is cool. This one is, would you come back to uni to tutor if someone offered you a job?
See, my brain's like, I don't have time for another part-time job. I don't think I'd come back. I don't know. I don't think uni would give me like full-time work, like just being a bit pragmatic in my answer so I can avoid being political. I don't know that there's like full-time work or work that is like gonna fill my days, you know. So it depends on what it was and it depends on what they wanted me to do. But as I sort of talked about before, like the variety in my job at the moment is, I've never had that variety anywhere. And yeah, so it would depend on what it is and where I could go from there. So I'm sort of at a bit of an impasse, you know, my reputation precedes me in a way. And so now I have to actually be really careful about like what I choose to do if I have a North Star that's guiding me in a certain direction. I don't know what that, I'm not trying to be coy, like I don't know where that is, but like if I decide to do something and it's not like directly related to tech, women in tech, comp sci software, I need to like steer towards that. And I don't know that looping back would be the way to do that, but maybe it is, but I don't see that being the case at the moment.
This might have just been a secret question from like Hayden or Mark, like trying to, it could have been. I guess following on from you having a lot of recommendations for like points that people can go to, do you have any good book recommendations? And the question also says it doesn't necessarily have to be for coding. So.
Oh, great, because I don't read coding books. I actually read a lot. I joke that my Goodreads is like where I really live on social media. But yeah, I like reading a variety of things. When I say I don't read coding books, like I'll read some books about like the tech industry and stuff, but not like C for dummies. My favorite book that I have read this year that's fiction is called Homegoing by Yagiasi, and she's just had another book come out called Transcending Kingdom, which I'm very excited to get my hands on. I am currently reading a book called 23 Things They Didn't Tell You About Capitalism, which is very interesting in terms of like economics and like the financial sort of system and the history of that and how it comes to be what it is. One of my favorite authors is Naomi Klein. I would recommend anything that she's written. And she's written a lot and really well. She's written about like neoliberalism. She's written about Puerto Rico. She's written about Trump. She's written about climate change. And like, I just want to be her, like her brain. She's got some serious big brain energy, like all of everything she wrote, like all these books that she wrote. And then like what happened in America with Trump. She wrote this other book where she's like, see, all these things I said, they're all related. And here it is. Here's how it came to be. So yeah, I also really like reading Roxane Gay's books, both her nonfiction and her fiction. That's probably enough. That's probably enough. Yeah, let's stop there. Add me on Goodreads, then you'll see all my books.
This question, I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. Do you have any advice for CSE tutors that are teaching a course for the very first time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I started teaching, what happened was Richard Buckland knew that there were all these like tutors who were in their final year who were graduating soon. So he knew he needed to like train people. And what happened was in the first semester of my second year, he like got all these people and then paired us with tutors, pre-existing tutors. And we would go to the classes and just like learn basically. And I mean, it wasn't paid, but you know, if your tutor was away, then you do the lesson and you get paid and stuff like that. But shadowing is very important. I think when you're tutoring for the first time, you're worried about like, do I know the content? Will I be able to answer the questions they have in a technical capacity? But really, the distance between a tutor who knows their stuff and a tutor who can teach it to you, it's two different things. So, which is a shitty way of me saying just because you know it doesn't mean you can teach it, but I like shadow someone, see how they actually teach, see how they hold the room, see how they handle questions. You know, do you take it at the time and let it derail you? Do you wait till the end? How do you sort of calmly say, I'll get to that, like that kind of thing. And also practice teaching something to someone, like even if it's not what you're going to be teaching. The real key that I found to teaching is communicating effectively and meeting, but that means meeting somebody where they're at. So you can say it in the way that it was said to you, and it will make no sense to them. So you need about 5 different ways to explain things, because not everything's going to work. And you know, you've probably had that tutor who's been like, this is this, and you're like, I don't get it, and they just say it again, and you're like, well, it's not a timing thing. Like it's not that I need to process. It's actually that the way you explained it didn't sort of click for me. So it's more about like managing the students than it is about you haven't gotten a good grade in a certain subject. Like, as I said, I didn't do many of the subjects that I taught. And then the ones that I did do, I didn't like do incredibly well. I looked at my transcript before this interview, you know, so it's not really about like having done well one time and now you're qualified to teach. It's like, how do you make somebody feel comfortable to admit that they don't know something to you? Like you've just spent 40 minutes teaching something to someone and they might not get it, and you want them to tell you that, not feel like they can't tell you that. So, you know, how to leave room within an explanation, how to pause and be like, are we all together? Like, is this making sense? How to sort of open the room without pointing fingers at people. And then also knowing how to get other people onto a certain task collectively, so you can go and help somebody one-on-one. Because a few minutes of one-on-one time, you don't need to stall the whole class just to answer somebody's question. I know that can be frustrating too, if you're like, yep, I'm with it, I got it. Oh my God, this silly kid like sitting at the front, like seriously, how can you not get it? You know, the tutor has to be the one to realize that that's not going to be a good like social environment for that person. Sort of get everybody else going, just be like, hey, we're going to take 5 minutes and I'm going to go. But yeah, so my advice is like shadow somebody else so you can see their techniques. And it's not just so that you can be like, I'll mirror their approach. It's like, I don't think I could do that, so I'm going to need to figure out a different way. And then also practice doing it to somebody else, because it's the fielding of unexpected questions that really throws you, not a live demo that doesn't work.
I think that's good advice. Really importantly, the part about how you need to like learn how other people teach and shadowing, I think is really good advice, especially because I think a lot of people think, oh, I've been taught before, I think I know how to replicate it, but it's really different being on the other end. Like you really have to switch your mindset in terms of like, it's almost like a completely different learning process, right? You're not learning the content anymore, you're actually trying to learn how they're teaching the content.
Yeah, it's a totally different skill set. And you know, I know that there's like in sort of like psychology, there's this concept of like parenting yourself, and like we are parenting our inner child at all times. Like when you're teaching, you are actually being a student. Like you are like, I am the teacher, but the way that I'm engaging with you is as if I am you. And so I need to hear what you're saying from the direction of you are like being vulnerable to me and like exposing your sort of progress and your understanding to me. I can't be short with you. I can't say I said that already. Like I can't be like, why didn't you do it before? Like if you just have to sort of hold it as it is and deal with it where it is. And then like, that's not the moment to sort of advise, you know, if you're like, you never come prepared, you know, you're not going to tell them that when they're asking you a specific technical question. You're like, oh, you'd know that if you were prepared. Like that's, you've completely disengaged the student. So just really, really meeting them where they are holistically and then responding to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. There's a question here about what you've learned specifically about computing outreach.
Outreach, like getting people engaged with technology.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that the way that computing is taught, especially in high schools, is inadvertently cutting people off and making them think that it's not for them. What I mean by that is when you rarely go to your subject at uni, right? And it's not like, other than advanced C++ programming, there's no other courses that's like, here's a language which you're learning for the sake of learning the language. You're learning a concept and using the right tool to learn the concept, right? So even in OOP, whatever that course is now, the Java course, everyone calls the Java course, you're not learning Java, you're learning OOP, and Java is the tool that you use to do that, right? So I think that when it comes to outreach, you can do the same things and be like, come into tech, we made it pink, like you should come because it's pink, so you should know, like it's for you. That's not actually effective. What's effective is like understanding what's interesting to somebody and then sort of tailoring the content around that. So, you know, when I was learning creative technology to teach to these students, what you're looking for is like intersections of different disciplines and interests and how we can use tech to sort of bring that to life in an interesting way. So if you're learning Python and I'm saying, hey, crunch this data set, and that's how we're going to learn Python. Who cares about data sets? Like no one cares about data sets. Like you want to actually make it meaningful and interesting. Mm-hmm. So outreach isn't about like hitting new people with the same stuff. It's about how it's not, you know, using the women in tech sort of sphere as an example. You don't want to bring women into tech as it is. Like I think we have all acknowledged that, you know, I struggle with this. Do I want to bring young women into an environment that's hostile towards them? Question mark. Probably not. I don't want to bring women into tech. I want to actually bring the tech to women and make tech interesting to women rather than just plonking them in this thing that is, for some reason, apparently calcified and can't be taught in any other way. So I've seen some really interesting things, especially with Python and MATLAB, where you learn coding by learning those languages. But instead of being mathematically focused, which tend to be our little baby examples when we teach stuff, it's like, hey, you can print the Fibonacci sequence, and like, hey, you can make a pyramid of numbers. Stop making it about math. There's no reason that it needs to be about maths. You can make it visual. You can make it interpretive. You can make it auditory. You can make it anything. And so when we have these like known subject areas that are exclusive to some people, or where, you know, children already are like, I'm bad at math and I'm 5. Like how you can't then say, come and do computing when the association is there, that it's, here's this new thing that's hard, and also it's this thing that I'm bad at. So being more like interesting with how you teach things will then bring people in because they feel comfortable to engage. So yeah, I don't know if that's what this person meant by outreach. If it isn't, like ask again. But yeah, I think that outreach is hard because we're trying to shove the same thing down people's throats and they don't want it. Change it and then people will want it. That's it.
Yeah, it's something that they're interested in, yet of course they want to learn more about it. Yeah,
exactly. I've seen some amazing like creative technology starter projects in MATLAB, for example, where you have to write a function that Warholifies your photo. So like it takes in a photo and then I'm like, make a 2x2 grid of it and make it blue, green, pink and yellow or whatever. And that's your code. And so you're learning functions, you're learning loops, you're learning arrays, like you're getting all the concepts, but it doesn't need to be math. Like it can be far more sort of expansive than that.
100%. Next question is, where are the most important places for CSE to improve as an industry?
The industry, oh good. I'm like, I don't know, you guys. The industry, man, that's a hard question. You guys keep being like, this is going to be hard. I'm like, no, it's fine. And now I'm like, no, this one's hard. As an industry, I'll maybe I'll get on my soapbox. I feel like tech needs to do, wait, I'll say this a different way. When you're learning comp sci and like when you're becoming like a software engineer, you're learning stuff and you want to master the tools. And you're like, you go through this learning journey where you're like, I'm learning, now I know it, now I want to be a master. And then when you know what you're doing, and I'm saying now, suspend your belief, you're at the point now where you know what you're doing. What makes work interesting? What makes work interesting is solving really hard problems. So your work is only as interesting as the problem is challenging, right? When you know what you're doing. So I'm an expert, right, at coding. Coding is not the challenge anymore because I know what I'm doing. I now want a challenge that will really, fry my brain. So the problems become more complex and more interesting. And I think that as that occurs, we steer towards, for example, financial markets or distributed systems or or things that are not technical. So you're like, this product interests me. I'm going to be a software engineer on this product, and the product's interesting, or this company because the company's interesting. But really the highly challenging, highly technical problems veer into territories of like gray ethics. That's sort of, I told you it was a soapbox. So as problems get harder, we're dealing with more complex systems, and then we're sort of doing things that maybe or maybe not are like great for the world. And I think, you can see this when I saw a great meme recently that was like, I don't get crypto. And it's like, oh, imagine if idling your car allowed you to buy weapons on the dark web. Like that's, but idling your car is bad for the environment. So, we've got all these crazy data centers out there, and like they're storing all our data. We can run code. Oh my God, it's so quick. It's so amazing. And then you're like, this is bad for the planet. So what tech needs to do is like really have a reckoning with like what we're doing with this knowledge. I know it back like in the early 2000s, it was all like, oh, computers going to take over the world, and like AI is going to kill humans one day, and like robots are just going to like take over the world. That was like the original panic. But now it's like, we know how to do some really, really complicated stuff, which means we know how to do some really shady stuff. And then the question is like, do we actually want to do that? And I think that people get so down the rabbit hole of like, I'm so smart, I know what I'm doing, this problem's so hard, oh my God, I solved it. That you're like affecting people's lives, and you're doing things that are like shaping the world and culture and the zeitgeist and the planet. And like, I think tech needs to just like, every time you make a decision, some companies say it's the front of the New York Times test. Like, would I want this to be on the front of the New York Times? But I think technology gets away with like bad things because people love progress. So, tech as like a sort of conduit, or like I use this word in place of progress. Like everybody loves progress, everybody loves change up to a certain point, or like where it gets into that uncanny valley or like scary point, oh, robots are going to take over the world. It's like, should we be doing this? Like, is me, running this, I don't want to make it on a small scale. Like, is this company running this like platform, which does X, worth the, fossil fuels that it takes to hold everybody's data? Like, it's just sort of like, one of those wicked problems that nobody really stops to think about. And I think that's sort of uni you're learning. So it's like, don't worry, it's fine. Like, you're like, what do we need to change? I'm like, shh, it's okay. You don't need to think about this now. But as you sort of leave, you're like, it starts becoming a little bit absurd. And you're like, does this matter more than this? But because it's not really spoken about, I'm stepping down now.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. I guess for what will probably be the last question, there's a request here. What is something that you wish we did ask you, and what would the answer be?
I don't know, maybe like, what's your favorite coffee shop on campus? Something easy, like, I don't know. You didn't even ask what degree I did. So I'm like, this is, I'm cheering. What question would I like to be asked? I actually do like to be asked for book recommendations. So I appreciated that one. Maybe the coffee shop one, and then my answer's the coffee cart.
Yeah,
I'd trek it all the way up the hill for that. It's worth it. I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was good.
I haven't tried it. Might have to give it a go. Yeah. Cool. I think that's about everything.
They have some time. I can see an interesting question here. How was uni like for you?
Just generally, like,
How was it?
Yeah, I mean, it when you leave uni and like everyone's like, oh, do you miss uni? Like, you're working. I'm like, nah, I like having my headspace. Like, I like coming home at the end of the day, and like that time's mine now. Whereas you never really switch off at uni. So nostalgia makes everybody say, yeah, it was amazing. And like, it was, because, I met so many friends. I grew so much as a person. I can't like transplant that part of my life out and imagine what it would look like today. Like I didn't come in coding, like I wasn't like that. So it shaped me in a way that I now couldn't detangle from like who I am. So uni, but like, what was it like? You know, even when you live close by, like it takes a long time to get there and your days are long, and, you know, maybe you think it's going to be more free, like less classes and stuff, but like, you know, first year especially, it was such a slog. Like you are there 9 till 6, like most days, and like you're like, I got this, it's gonna be like 3 days a week, and then you're like, longer than school? What? I don't get that. Like I just remember crazy days, like your backpack's so bloody heavy and you're like, do I pack lunch because it's going to be gross when I get there, but I don't want to spend $10, like, and now I got to go move my car because I was only in a 2 hour, oh my God, I got a ticket. Like, it's just it was just like gross. Like it was a lot. Like uni was a lot. But I think by the time I like got a feel for it and found my feet, it became so much fun. Because it's not about the classes and like that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, the benefit of uni is that you are in a place with your peers for another 4 to 6 years. And I don't think I was the kind of person who'd just get a job straight out of school. There's something to be said for like going along a journey at the same time as those around you. And yeah, I mean, the next sort of shared experience is this like hectic search for a job after uni, as if like that's the only thing you can do with your life. But it's really the last time you'll spend time learning the same things around people at the same pace. And that's really fun. Like it's kind of, you know, time keeps marching on. So it's nice to look back on it fondly, but would I do it again? Like, man, no, like absolutely. Like I could, because you can't do it for the first time again. You can't do it when you're 18 a second time. Like it was amazing. And now it's a good memory. And like, I think of it fondly and I know what it sort of gave me. So yeah, uni was good.
Yeah. Oh, we just got a last question. Let's just, this is the real last question. Somebody said, any parting advice?
Parting advice. I mean, like I give him 2 hours of advice. I'm like, I don't know. I'm allowed my advice machine. Advice. My brain is like, no. Parting advice. Stay connected, like with people. Something that there we go. It's come to me. There are people at uni who you'll like be peripherally involved with, and like even your friends, you're so tight now. But when it's over, like you'll all go and do different things. And I think keeping yourself as like just be nice, right? Like if you keep yourself as a generally nice person who is well regarded, that will pay off forever. And these people that you're learning with, you're going to come across them like over and over and over and over again, you know, and it's not just because you work at the same company or live in the same suburb. Like it's really like, these are the professionals who will be entering the workforce with you. Like you've got another 40 years ahead of like, oh, I went to uni with you. Like, so if you are like, it will pay off for a lifetime is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, there's no reason to be vindictive or like let beef lie and fester and stuff like that. I just think if you can be contented and like settled and be held in high regard, then it will benefit you for forever in ways that you don't expect. So yeah, consider it like a little deposit in like consider it an investment in your future, because these things come up in unexpected ways. And these are the people that will be around you when that happens.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. I think that was a perfect last advice. Thanks everyone for joining today. Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for your time here.
No worries.
Really. You have anything to say?
Me? No, thanks.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. I was like, wow, 2 hours. Can she do it?
Yeah, did it.
Apparently I can. So I'm gonna go be a hairdresser now and talk to everyone ever. But yeah, thanks. You made it really easy. So yeah, thanks you guys. Great series, and thanks for having me.